So first of all, let's try to understand like what we are covering, right? We are saying that we will be covering Selenium grid architecture. Okay. But before that, we need to first understand what really is a Selenium grid. Okay. Now, anyone who is already aware about Selenium, who already has the expertise working on Selenium, right? They are aware like if you have to work on a browser, you need a driver, right, to connect to, so that you can mimic some actions on the browser, right? So what you do normally is, let's say there are multiple ways to do it. Okay. So one of the ways that you use drivers directly. Okay. You use drivers directly. So in that case, what you will do is you will create the session of the WebDriver like this, WebDriver WD, and over here you will do something like this, new Chrome driver. Let's say we are talking about Chrome as of now. So you will do this. So if you use this approach, right? Okay, Lukin wants to ask something. Just a second. Okay, fine. See, if you have any questions, right? Anyone, you can also ping there, and I'll read the questions there also, right? And in the end, once we hold for a small duration, then I will open up this uh, for anyone to speak and ask questions. Okay, so let's just hold for just few minutes more. Okay, so where I was, so there are two options, right? The first option is that you want to directly connect to the driver, so you will be doing this, right? WebDriver WD equals to new Chrome driver. So what this will do, right? This will help you to create a new session. Okay, this will help you to create a new session. Okay, it will help you create a new session. When I say a new session, there is a session ID which gets involved. Okay, which gets generated, and as part of it, it also opens up a browser, right, on which the actions will be taking place, right? And what really happens is, if you go by the architecture of Selenium, this is the architecture. You have your client, which is your script, right? Your JavaScript, let's say, where you would have written all this code, right? This is residing here. And once you trigger it, it will then try to connect to your Chrome driver, right? Which would become in this case your server. Okay. And this Chrome driver, it receives all the requests as we have seen in the last case. It receives all the input, right, as REST API calls. Okay, REST API calls, and then it will mimic all the requests it receives, right? It will go using Chrome driver. It will mimic those actions on the browser, right? And whatever response it receives from the browser, it will take it and then pass it on to the client again by through REST API calls. So this is how when you're using Chrome driver. Okay. Now let's move to the second part. Let's say now we are not using driver directly. We are using Selenium grid. Okay. When people say about Selenium grid, right? They think that Selenium grid is like is now replacing this Chrome driver. See, that is not the part. Okay. I'll show you the architecture here. In this case, what will happen is, again, your client would be saying like how it was earlier, your script, right? Instead of writing this line, you would be writing something like this. You would be doing WebDriver WD, let's say, and you will be doing new remote WebDriver, right? Remote WebDriver. And over there, you will have to give the URL of your Selenium grid, right? Wherever that is running. If it is running on your local machine, you would be providing the path as HTTP localhost, whatever that port is, and I think the port which gets hosted is 4444, right? And once you provide this, you need to also tell the remote WebDriver what browser you want to work on, right? So let's say you created some Chrome options there and you're providing it. So you did something like this above this. You said Chrome options. You say option equals to new Chrome option, right? So you will do all of this. And now what will happen is you are passing this option to this field. Now, because it's a Chrome options part, right, coming from the Chrome option class, so here it will get to know that on the remote WebDriver, which is our Selenium grid, it has to work on the Chrome browser. That is how the information is taken, right? Now, if we move ahead, right, how the architecture looks in this case. Your client is this, which is holding your this lines, okay, this your code, right? This code. So this is sitting here. It's again a Java file. Now, again, the interaction has to be through REST API calls, right? Which is, let me write it, which is using what protocol? W3C WebDriver protocol. Okay, so it follows that protocol to do all of this. Now, once this is done, on this side, right? Earlier we had Chrome driver directly, right? This time it will not be the Chrome driver, it would be your Selenium grid, right? Your Selenium grid. And in the end, we have what? We still want to connect to the browser only, right? This browser, Chrome browser, right? Chrome browser. So people think that this is the Selenium grid is the part where is like it has replaced this Chrome driver. Actually, that is not the case, right? Selenium grid is just a wrapper. It's just a wrapper. It still needs a driver to interact with the specific browser. Okay. Now, we'll come to that part, right? So understand that there's still a need of what? The driver here, which is like a Chrome driver, right? The browser specific driver. It is still required. It is that we have added an extra layer, a wrapper kind of an information, right? Where this will take the request first, right? And here it will decide where to forward this request. Okay, it will decide where to forward this request, where to forward this request, okay, this request. Let's say that you had two browsers, right? You wanted to work on two different browsers, Firefox and Chrome, right? For Firefox you need Gecko driver or Firefox driver, whatever that is, right? You need that driver, right? Gecko or Firefox, whatever that name is, right? You need that driver. So now you earlier, what was the case? That you were able to only connect to the Chrome driver because that is what you had. But this time you wanted to connect to on two different browsers, right? And you don't want to maintain the headache of managing these. So what Selenium does is Selenium says, okay, we understand the problem that there could be a need to run on multiple browsers or cross browser, right? Or do parallel execution or more stuffs around it, right? So it is basically about distributing testing, right? Distributed testing. So if you want to achieve that, if you have that objective, right, that is the place where you will be using Selenium grid. Selenium grid is only working as a central manager. You understand that part, okay? Selenium grid is only working as a central manager, which will only take care of sending the information to the right node, okay, and find the relevant node and pass on that information. Okay, so let's say I wanted to work on Chrome, right? This information is passed through my scripts. It translates into an API call. It is received by the Selenium grid. Selenium grid here will read the information and get to know that, okay, this is for Chrome. So it needs to now make a decision whether it should send it here or here, right? So because it is on Chrome, it will pass on to this node, right? Wherever this is running, it will pass that information to that node. Okay. I'll come to the different components of Selenium grid, but understand this is the flow. Okay. It is not that you are surpassing, I mean, there is no need of drivers anymore. No, that is not the case. Drivers are still required and they would be needed, right? It is just that Selenium grid is an extra layer which you put in front of everything, and you're saying now the traffic will go through this, and this is the sole. I mean, this will make the decision where to route this traffic. Okay, so this understanding should be very clear. Like what is how in case of using driver directly, how it works, and in case of Selenium grid, how it really works. Right now, let's see this thing, right? Okay, before moving ahead, let me also show you the architecture of Selenium grid. Okay, how does the Selenium grid looks like? Okay, first of all, Selenium grid, right? If you have to work on Selenium grid, what you need is a jar file, an executable jar file, which you can find on Selenium website. Okay, so from there you will download this file and you will get a jar file there on your local machine, right? What you will do is you can just run this jar file by this command, java -jar, and then the name of the file, whatever that file is, Selenium jar, whatever the name is, .jar, right? And here in the last thing, right, you have to mention what mode you want to run this Selenium grid as. Okay, so this is the piece of information where we'll have to provide the mode detail. Okay, now what is this mode? Selenium grid works in 3 different modes. Okay, the first part is the standalone mode. The second part is that it works on hub and node mode. Okay, and the third part is that it works on distributed mode. Okay, so how many nodes we have? We have 3 modes. Okay, this is the part. Okay, now this is like number of modes it can work in. Okay, let's try to understand like what are these. Okay, when we say generally, right, when we are learning Selenium and we're trying to learn Selenium grid also, right, on a local machine, we would pull this Selenium grid, right, into a machine and run it in the standalone mode. Okay, this is the most easiest way to start with working with Selenium grid. So this time you will just do is you will say standalone, right, and here it will start working as a single thing, as a single unit. Okay, and it will take care of everything. I'll come to that part. I'll come to that part, like when I am saying it work as a single unit, what I really mean. Okay, but understand, this is the standalone mode. In the case of hub node, so let me write it here. So it will work as a single unit. Okay, just one server, just one thing, right? One thing. Let me write it here. One thing. In case of hub and node mode, it will work with 2 things. Okay, you will have to spin up 2 things. One, a hub, and this is the node. Okay, so you will have to start your Selenium jar file first as hub. Okay, in the hub mode, and then you will start into a new prompt and you will start the as what we say in the node mode. Okay, so this is that part. So how many components are involved here? 2. In case of distributed modes, you will spin up 6 different components. Okay, 6 different components. I'll come to them, like what are these, right? But understand, in case of distributed mode, you will spin up 6 different components, right? And they will form, like this could be like complete Selenium grid now. Okay, 6 components. Here you were running it in 2 different components. Here it was running the single component, right? 1, 2, and 6. And whatever operations it has to do as a Selenium grid, it will all happen. Just a second. Okay, so whatever operation there are, right, it will happen based on the mode you are running, right? So let's say in the standalone mode, this component only will take care of everything. Okay, whatever it has to do, it will take care by using this component only. In case of hub and node, the what we say, the responsibility gets distributed between these 2 things. Okay, in case of 6 distributed mode here, right, every specific component is doing something specific. Okay, we'll understand about these all components next. Now when we're discussing the architecture of Selenium grid, it will make things more clear. Okay, so first of all, let me show you how to download Selenium grid so that we can start. Okay, and then I will show you this the architecture also. Selenium dev.dev, right? So this is the site. You will go there. Once you are here, you will go to the download section and you can see, right? Okay, let me go back. You can read it from here. If you want to scale by distributing and running tests on several machines and manage multiple environments from a central point, okay, then you should be using Selenium grid, right? By using Selenium grid, you can have different type. You can have a control on different kind of machines, right? And you could execute your test cases on them. Okay, I'll brief this part again. Okay, but let's just first understand. But let's just first download the Selenium grid. So we have to go on download screen. If you would scroll down, right, this is the Selenium grid server. Okay, Selenium server grid. You can download from here. Okay, once downloaded, you will see a file like this. Okay, let me show you. Okay, a jar file like this. Now, if you have to start, right, what you will do is, let me open a command prompt from this. Okay, and let me bring it here. So if I have to start my Selenium grid, right, the most easiest way is the standalone mode, right? Java jar Selenium and standalone mode. Standalone. Okay. So here what will happen is it will start my Selenium grid in this mode. Okay. Let it start. Okay. So let me show you. So this started on this. It is started on my machine, on my local machine, and it is using this part, right? This URL here. Let me grab this. Okay. So this is running on port number 4444, right? Let me open this. Localhost 4444, right? So if you would see this, this is the GUI of the Selenium grid, right? And this is how you see it. Okay. You can see here you are seeing a lot of informations. One is just giving the overview where it is being pointed, right? Where it is running, and it is also showing you the sessions. Currently, there have been no sessions created. What is a session? Session is this. Whenever you run this command, right? This new keyword, new Chrome driver, new remote web driver, right? This results into creation of a session. Okay, this thing, right? Session ID. So that is what it means. As many times whatever this grid can support, it will show up here, right? Okay, so this is how the GUI of Selenium grid looks like. Now let's come on and try to understand like why do we really need Selenium grid, right? And what purpose it solves. So let me go there. First of all, see, uh, in today's world, right? Today, ideally, what people do, like you and me, we do is we just write our test cases. We write our automated test cases, and generally, like I'm not saying it is for everyone, but understand that we write our automated test cases, and then we just test it on a single browser. Okay, we test it on a single browser. We test it on a single browser, let's say Chrome, right? So if that is the need, then you don't require Selenium grid. You can just directly use the first part, right? Which is what new Chrome driver like kind of a stuff, and this will suffice your need. You don't need a grid for it, first of all. But what, and see, when I'm doing this, right, I have a limitation here that I have to use my system, the platform which I'm using, the OS of it. So currently my laptop runs on Windows. Okay, it is a Windows machine. So the OS is Windows. Okay, and the browser involved is what? Browser involved is Chrome. So this is the setup which I have. This is my personal thing, right? Now let's say that I wrote my test case, I ran this, and this works fine here. But now I have a need where I want to run on things like, let's say, on a Windows machine, but I want to run it on an Edge browser. Okay. Okay. So this is like one kind of piece of information where it's a combination of what? Platform OS plus the browser name, right? The browser thing. So based on platform and OS, let's try to categorize things. So this is could be one combination. Let's say I want to use a Mac machine and I want to use, let's say, Chrome on it. Okay, so this becomes another kind of a setup which I need. Let's say I want a Linux machine and I want to run it on Opera. Let's say, I don't know if it is feasible or not, but let's say, right? So this is the third part. Similarly, you could keep on adding, right? A single machine, a Windows machine, right, can have different browsers, right? Let's say Windows Edge, Windows. So let's say that you wanted to do what? You're saying that, okay, for every such combination which you can think of or create or which you really need, you will create a new physical machine. Let's say, right, you will create a new physical machine. You will buy a new laptop. Okay, you will buy a new laptop and you would use it for Windows, right? It's a Windows machine and you will install Edge here. So this becomes your node. Okay, now I'm coming on to the terminology, right, which would be required to understand the architecture. So this is your node one. Similarly, let's say you have another machine which is a Mac machine, right? It's a Mac machine where you want to run things on Opera. And one more complexity. Let me add one more complexity. Each of these browsers, right, or each of these OS also has a version. Let's say you want to run things on Windows 11, and Edge needs to be what? Let's say 100, right? There is another laptop you wanted to run, you want to test on what Windows again, right? And here you want, this is Windows 10 and you want to test on Chrome, and this is the browser of what, let's say 97. Similarly, there is another machine, Windows, right? Again, let's say 7, again Chrome version 100, right? So try to understand the point, right? There is no limitation, right, on what kind of combination of platform and OS, platform OS plus browser combination you may require. Okay, now understand, like, you cannot have all these kind of a setup on a single machine. You cannot have that, right? You have a Windows machine, you cannot, again, you could use the you could create virtual machines on your device, right, on that physical machine, but how many can you create? It requires resources, it requires CPU utilization and everything, right? Memory needs to be shared and all that. We are not using supercomputers or a very high end processors in our system, right? It cannot support everything. So there could be a need where you would require such kind of nodes, right? So what you will do ideally is you will spin up these kind of nodes somewhere, right? Let's say over the you created some AWS EC2 machines and you spin them up by these configurations, let's say, right? And now what I'm saying is I'm marking them as, what I'll say is I will term these as nodes, because these are the places where I have to run my execution. Okay, these are the different machines of combination of platform, OS and browser where I need to execute my test case. Using my personal laptop, I was only able to test on Chrome, and that too on Windows 11. That's it. But I wanted to test things on these kind of different systems, right? So Selenium understands that point. Selenium said, okay, let me provide you a solution. So they provided us Selenium Grid. Okay. Now Selenium Grid is like a manager. It is sitting there. It is sitting there, right? It is sitting there. It has some components, which I will come next, right? But understand, now we are leaving that responsibility to Selenium Grid. We have to somehow attach all these nodes to the Selenium Grid. Okay. We have to attach all these nodes to Selenium Grid. Okay, which is a part of Selenium Grid itself. When I'll discuss the components, so we need to attach them. Now, whenever the traffic comes in, right, it will make a decision. It will make a decision where to pass, right? Based on the input it receives, it will make that decision and connect to the right node so that the execution can take place. So try to understand what is the meaning of distributed testing. This is the distributed testing, where we have different kind of nodes based on the platforms plus the browser thing, right? And based on your need, you would start execution on the specific node. Okay, and this is where Selenium Grid helps us. Okay, now let's come on to the part of the architecture of Selenium Grid, where things will get more clear. Okay, so let's start that part, and then I will show practically like how all of this works. Okay, Selenium Grid architecture. Selenium Grid architecture here. Okay, now just a second. Okay, yeah. So Selenium Grid architecture. Now Selenium Grid, right, has 6 components. Okay, so what we do is first component. Let us round. I'm just writing down. I will explain. Right, the first component is the router. Okay, router, you can understand, it helps us to route the traffic, right? So our scripts are here, right? Our scripts are sitting here, which is the client part. Okay, which is the client part. Our scripts will connect to this router. So for our client, right, what is the face of this Selenium Grid? This router, and this is exposed at what port? Port number 4444, right? See this 4444. This is where you get the access to Selenium Grid through router. Okay, so router is the first component or the only component you have directly access to. Okay, all the internal components you don't have access to them directly. Okay, if you're using Selenium Grid, so understand that part. Okay, now let's go back. Okay, so this is that router. So what is the responsibility of router? The responsibility is to route the traffic. Okay, and I will keep on adding what all responsibilities is. The second component which this has is is the session queue. Okay, session queue. Let me write. This is the second component we hold. It's a queue. We understand what is the queue, right? If you stand in a line, let's say to buy a ticket, that's a queue, right? Of a movie ticket, if you buy and you're standing in a line, that's a queue, right? First in, first out order, right? So you go in first, you will get the ticket first, and then the second person, and so on, right? So it follows the order of FIFO. Okay. So here what will happen is every time this client or any client, right? Let's say we have so many clients, we could have so many clients. We discussed about different clients, right? We can have, right? Let's say these are all different clients, C1, C2, C3, and all that, right? There are different clients, and for all of them, this is the entry point, right? This Selenium grid. So they will all connect to this, right? Now let's say, or let's say a single client is asking for multiple sessions also, right? So what will happen is all the requests will be routed through this. So there are two possibilities. First, you are starting fresh and you wanted to create a new session. Okay. So when you wanted to create a new session, when you're creating a new session, what will happen is router will add a request in this session queue. Okay, it received a new request thing. So new request. So it will pass this entry into session queue. Okay. Now this entry will sit here, right? Now we have a different component whose responsibility is to pick this session and assign something to it so it can work. Okay, we'll come to that part. So one is router, second is session queue. But understand, it will have different session requests. Okay, so let me write here. It will have different session request. Stores session request. Okay, stores session request. Okay. Now let's come on to the other part. Right, we talked about nodes. So that node thing, right, is also a component of Selenium grid, right? You spin up some machine somewhere, right, which has that OS and the browser thing, right? And you created those nodes, right? This is one node, this is second node, this is third node, and all that, and you can keep on adding whatever you want, right? So these are all the nodes, right? Now, so this is the third component: router, session queue, and nodes, right? Now, okay. Okay, let me write here session map. Okay, let me start with this session map. Okay, now it's a map. What is a map? Map has two things: one, a key, and second is a value, right? So this is a session map. It's a key and a value pair, right? Anyone who's aware about programming, right? They are aware like what maps are, right? It is a data structure which follows the pattern of key value, right? You assign a key, and using that key you can fetch a value. Okay, so what is the key and the value here? Okay, we'll come to that part. But understand from the name itself, it is like you're trying to keep a map for maintaining the sessions. Okay, I'll come to that part again. So this is the fourth component. We talked about router, we talked about session queue, we talked about nodes. Session map we have not discussed. We'll come to it. But understand, this is one of the component. There is another component with the name as distributor. Okay, so this is the distributor here. Now, what is the responsibility of distributor? Whenever you create a node, right, and you want your Selenium grid to know about it, right, you need to register that node to your Selenium grid, right, so that it knows that there's a machine lying somewhere which it can use, right? So all that thing, right, I mean, that process of registering a node to a Selenium grid happens through this distributor. Okay, so all those requests would be handled by this distributor. So it creates what? The distributor has a role to register the nodes. Okay, so it registers the nodes. So it maintains the registry of these nodes. So it is aware like how many nodes we have, what are the different slots available, and all that. So it knows about this. Okay, so this is one thing. Now, distributor part. Okay, and there is an event bus. There is an event bus. Okay, event bus. What this will do is, this is responsible for the communication, the internal communication, which is happening within the Selenium grid. See, this is the outer communication here, right? Which we have already seen, the between client and the router. Okay, this is the communication which is happening between the client and the router, which is an external part. So we are already seeing like the communication happens through REST API calls. But the internal communication which is happening within this Selenium grid, right? All this communication is happening through events. And what is taking control of it? These are all being done through event bus. Okay, so this is the part which is responsible for the communication. So let me write it here. Communication, okay, handles communications between different components. Okay, so that this is an important part of Selenium grid. Now let's try to understand the process. We already have the nodes. Okay, we got the nodes. Now the nodes are here. So nodes are here. So what will happen is, once if you have to register the nodes, right, you will have to connect through the event bus, right? And then and then once it is I mean, through the event bus communication, distributor will get to know about these nodes. Okay, and distributor will maintain these nodes with them, right? Now why it is maintaining these nodes? Because because any of our clients request for a new session, right? To create a new session, it needs a node, a physical machine, or some machine on which it could spin up a new browser, right? So these are those machines. Now let's say client C1 asked for a machine which is Windows 11, which has Chrome, right? So our request will come in, and this will sit here, okay, with all the detail. So it will say that, okay, there's a Windows 11 required with the Chrome thing. Okay, great. So this is sitting in queue. Distributor has a job. What this will do is, it will keep on polling this session queue. Okay, it will check this after a very frequent interval. It will keep checking this, right? And if it finds any entry here in the queue, right, it will pick that up. Right, and try to match that request with a available node, right? Let's say this node 2 here, right, is the one which matches that our need, which is what? Windows 11 plus Chrome, right? Let's say this matches our need. So this will do was, it will assign this node to the session request, right? And to maintain to maintain an entry for it, like, what it will do is, it will go and make an entry and a value would be what? Your node ID, right? So this is the session ID which was generated here, right? Distributor picked that session ID based on the information which it needed, like what kind of platform and browser it needs. It identified a specific node from this pool, and then assigned that node to that request and created an entry in the session map. Okay, so this is how this will do, right? For all these kind of things, right, it will generate it will receive a request here, ID for it, and once it matches to a node, it will keep on adding those entries in the session map. Okay, so all those entries would be made here. Okay, so session ID 1, session ID 2 and 3 and all that, right? So let's try to now understand the flow. Let's say for the first time, right, we are starting our scripts and we want to request a new session, right, which is Windows 11 plus Chrome, right? A request is fired from the client, reached through REST API calls, right? It is received here, right? Router will receive it, and router will say that router will add an entry in the session queue, right? Now there's an entry. Distributor is already polling this session queue to know, like, whether there's an entry or not. It finds one, it picks it up. Also, distributor also knows about the available nodes, right? Now distributor will match the node with the session request, and if it finds a match, it will create an entry in what? Session map, right? And all these communication is happening through this event bus, right? Now let's say the second case, where you already have a existing session, right? The client already has an existing session, and it wants to run some more steps using that session. Okay, so this time when it will be sending a request, it would be also sending what? The session ID with it, right? A session ID with it. A session ID would be provided. So router will receive that session ID. Now once it is receiving the session ID, right, it would be doing what? It would not be going to session queue, right? The session queue was only required if you wanted to create a new session, right? In this case, we want to work on an existing session. So what this router will do? router will go to session map this time. Okay, and it will see that if there is an entry in session map here with the key thing, right? So it will check all the keys, and let's say that this session ID matches to this key here, right? So it will know that what is the node which is being used, right? Let's say node 3 is the one which is used here, right? So it will do what? It will know the node ID now, and it will route the traffic directly to that node. Okay, and this is how the communication will happen. Now, using the session ID, it found out the node ID from the session map and routed the traffic to the node directly. Okay, so this is the architecture of Selenium Grid, how it really works. Okay, now coming on to the modes, right? The 3 modes. When we talk about standalone, right? I told you when you are talking about standalone, you should be thinking that you're running or that it's like a single unit, 1 unit first of all, right? And when I say 1 unit, it means your same laptop. Let's say I have a laptop and I'm running this on and I wanted to run this in standalone mode. So what will happen is my same laptop is acting as a node, right? Because here the execution will happen. Plus here also, and plus here everything else, like all the decisions are also being taken here only, right? So what will happen is in the standalone mode, this entire thing, right from the router to this, right? This part, this complete part, right, works as a single unit, right? So it is like a black box for us. So it becomes a black box where we don't have to know anything about the internally, right? The communication which has to happen, it will happen internally. It will take care of it. Still, they are working as separate components internally, right? But for us as an end user, it does not make any changes, right? We just have to interact with the router only, right? Using this 4444 port, and it will make sure that everything is happening here. Okay, so that's why I said this is the most easiest one. You have to just spin up your Selenium grid with this standalone mode, right? So this is how it works. Okay, let's go to the second part where we talk about node and hub. Okay, now you would be already knowing what is a node. Node is this, right? So in that component, what we do is we are saying this is one component. Okay, so we separate this node part outside, right? And we keep all the other things like this, right? All the other 5 components together. Okay, so it's, so understand what we are doing. We are separating the responsibility, right? We said that, okay, you spin up Selenium grid in 2 different modes, one a hub and another as a node. Okay, node would be responsible for running things, right? And hub will be responsible for managing all the internal stuff here, right? So if you are running in this way, this will be acting as hub. All these 5 components combined will work as a hub, right? And this is the node, right? In the distributed mode, right? In the distributed mode, so first of all, this is 2 units, right? In the distributed mode, you will spin up all these components separately. So how many components we have? Router, session queue, session map, distributor, event bus, and nodes. So 6, you will have to spin up Selenium grid in 6 different modes. Okay, so we'll see how to do that, right? But understand what is really happening when someone says we want to run things in standalone mode. This is what they mean. They are saying all 6 components are combined together, and it will act as a black box for us, and this will take care of all the internal processing, and it will also work as a node. Second, when someone says I will be working in node and hub mode, it is there that we want to separate out the responsibilities there, right? And the third part where we can have different components there, right? Working on different things. Now let's see like how it really works, right? If I want to show you practically how it all works. So what I've done is I have created one test here, okay, which is using our Selenium grid, okay. And here what I'll do is I'll start my server in the standalone mode. I think I've already started, right? So this is starting in standalone mode, right? So if you would see, right, let's go through the log. So we are discussing the approach 1, right, which is the standalone mode. So if you would see, let's see the logs. Once I started this, it is saying adding edge for this 8 times Chrome, Firefox, switching node, right? You see this ID here. This is a node ID, right? This is a node ID which Selenium grid created, right, for my machine itself, right? It said that let me attach this node ID to it, right, so that I can keep it in the session queue, sorry, session map, right, with the session ID. Okay, and it is saying that it added this, right? So it added this. So first of all, it made this down to up, right? It was down, it made it up. So now it is running, and then it is adding this. When it says adding, it is adding it into the in the distributor list as of now. Whenever someone will make a request, distributor will receive that request and attach it to the this node. Let's see how. Let me run this. Over here in my test case, I'm doing nothing. I'm just opening up the browser, and I'm also printing the session ID. Okay, that is the only logging in. Let me run this, okay, and see the output. So let me just check. This is Chrome test, and we are running Chrome thing here, fine, and pom.xml is fine. Okay, let me run this. So let's see the logs also. You would see that you would find two entries, some logs, some new logs here, right? Let's try to understand what are those logs. It is starting up currently. See, it is saying session request received by the distributor, right? So distributor was sitting idle. Okay, it opened up the browser on the left hand side. Let me bring it here. See, the execution has already started, and let me bring it here, and you can see what is happening. Let me bring it down. Let's try to understand this log. Okay, what it is doing is it already knew about the node, right? And distributor was continuously polling our session queue, right, to understand is there a new request for a session. This time a request was made. How the request was made? Request was made by this, right, with this line. Whenever we did this create driver, right, here we are creating a new driver, right? You see here we are creating a new remote web driver, right, through the Chrome. Okay, so whenever this gets triggered, right, it will send a request to our server for creating a new session. Okay, our REST API call would be fired. Now what is happening is, okay, let me go back to the here, right? So now distributor sends say that session request received by the distributor. So distributor was able to receive the request, and now it started looking what is the matching node I have to support this need. So it tried to find out. It says that okay, here, see, it is also saying what is the session request. Session request is saying that they need to run it on the Chrome browser, right? And over here, in the next entry, it is saying it created the session, right? Session created by the node. So it said that this is the node ID which I'm using, right? And if you would see, this is the session created by node. Okay, see this thing, right? Let's match what is this. And you see the above information, this part. This was the node ID. This was the node ID. And now this new entry here, right? This is just session ID. Let me show you in the logs also. I printed this in my script also, right? This S1. You see, I'm printing the session which is getting generated. So let me show you the value of it. You see AC909 and all that. So this is the session ID which is getting generated. And if you match to this is the same value, right? AC909. So understand what is happening. This session ID, now in the session map, it would generate a new entry in the session map where session ID is this, and node ID was what would be what? This would be the node ID. Okay. Okay. Now see here, this log entry, right, is coming from a node machine. Okay. I'll explain, like when we run things in separately, right, it will make more clear. But try to understand there are only two entries made in the logs, right, for that session thing. One is the above entry here, right, this part, right, and second entry is this, which is coming from distributor. You can read it from here, distributor, right? And this was about local node. So first of all, local node received a request saying that okay, distributor identified the node, it sent the request to that node, right? When node received that request, it created a new session. Once a session was created, it generated an ID for it, which is this ID, right? And then once the ID was generated, that information was passed to the distributor, saying that okay, node is telling distributor, okay, you asked me to create a new session, I created it, and this is the ID for it. You already have my node ID. Please go and do the needful. So distributor knew I have both the information, node ID and session ID. Let me go to the session map and make an entry. Okay, that is what it did. And you can see the log from distributor. It is saying it is generate a new session, right? It is saying session created by distributor. ID is this, right? Here, can we find the node ID? No, it does not print the node ID here, but you can see that the entry of see those internal things, right? About session map, session queue, what all it holds and all. You will not be able to see this in this log. You will be able to see what is the node ID generated and the session ID generated. That is the only information which is printed here. Okay, but try to understand what is really happening behind the scene. Okay, so we generated we already had the node, so ID was generated for it. Then we received a request, and the request was sent to the node. It generated a session ID, and now an entry is made in the session map. So this is the entire flow. But again, it is running as a black box for us, right? We cannot see it separately. So every log from different components is shown in the same session here, right? In this console, right? Let me stop it and let's let us create a node and let's see what will happen, right? Now, to create a node, the process is same. We'll open it in a different mode now. Okay, we'll say command prompt, and let me move to this drive, and let me go to the place where I have the Selenium server running. So I copied this, I paste it here. So I'm here now, right? Now let's start our Selenium grid in the node mode, right? So I'll say Selenium and node. Okay, if I run this, see the okay, let me bring it in a separate here, right? See here, reporting surface this, okay, and it is doing all the stuff. See here, there is a new log generated in the hub section, right? See, earlier it was not knowing about node, right? Once we spin up the node, right? See the logs, right? Started registration process, right? For the node, right? It started the registration process. See at what port your hub was running. Your hub was running at the port number 444. Let me show you this. So if you have to understand, right? In the standalone mode, it was like a single unit like this, and the port which was exposed to the world was 4444. Right? This was the standalone mode. Standalone mode. In case of hub and node, we have two different things, right? All 5 units sitting here, and this is running as a single thing as hub, and there's still a node which will be running, right, separately. So this hub is still accessible through port number 444, and your node, right? Let me show you. Your node is running on port 5555. Okay, so the node is running on the port number 5555. So you can go back and you can just see this runs on this port, right? Now, when you are running in this mode, right, they know like what is the default port to connect to and all that, right? And once they keep checking, right, whether there is something running on port number this or not. Once something came up on this port number, right, it automatically started the registration process, right? It sent the request, it knew about each other, and the process completed. Now hub knows about the node, right? So if you would go back on this lane, first of all, let's check the logs itself. If you would check the log, right, it is saying switching node, right? So this is the node ID, right? Now let me show you the node ID here also. Does it show a node ID? No. Okay. This is a node, right? But our ID is generated by the hub to identify what node it is, right? So it generated an ID which is internal to it. So it said that okay, let me register the ID, right? But what is the URL where it is accessible? See the URL here: 192.68, 168.136, and port number is this. See where it is running on the same port, right? So it came to know about this. So for this thing, right? This thing which I've opened in this console, understand this is running as a node, right? This has been the request has been received by the hub, and it assigned an ID to it, which is a node ID, and then it registered it, right? And it is saying added node this ID, right, to itself. And see here in this Selenium grid, now it shows that node here, right? You can see the URL of the node. If you keep on adding nodes, right, different nodes coming from different machines, you will see different nodes being displayed here, like different cards here, right? Okay, one more thing around nodes, right? You see in the nodes for a specific node, right? You can see, right? It shows some information like Chrome, it shows 8, Firefox, it shows 8, Edge, Internet Explorer, it shows 1, Edge, it shows 8. What are these numbers? And also it shows, right, it's a Windows machine. You can see right here, right? So you can see it's a Windows 10 machine and all that, right? It has 25 slots. It has this all this information and all that, right? And this is the node ID which was registered for this machine. Okay. So all this information is there. Now, one more thing. What about these, right? 8, 8, 1, and 8? So what it is saying is that this particular node is capable of running 25 different instances of the browser. Okay. And there is a limit. There's a limit. On the Chrome side, if you want to run Chrome, at max, it can run 8 different sessions on Chrome. Okay. It is saying you could run 8 different sessions on Firefox. You could run 1 session on this Internet Explorer. You could run 8 sessions on this Microsoft Edge. Okay. So does it mean, so total, what is the total here? Let me write it here. So what is the total here? So when we register a node, right? Node has different slots. Okay, it has slots. Slots 1, whatever slots are. Let's say 25 slots we had, right? The first 8 slots, right? The 8 slots are booked for what? It said that it could support Chrome on these 8 slots, right? So what it means? 1 slot means you could assign 1 session to it. Okay, 1 session to it. Now, now what it said? 8 slots are booked for what? 8 slots are booked for Firefox. 1 slot is booked for what? 1 slot is booked for the Explorer, Internet Explorer. And 8 slots are booked for what? Edge, right? Whatever that is. So 1 slot means 1 session. So in total, how many sessions you could run? I mean, ideally, as they're saying, we could run, let's add them up, 25 sessions. So does it mean that you could run 25 different sessions? Let's talk about parallel execution, right? Does it mean I could run 25 parallel sessions? It means that I could run 25 test cases parallelly using a single node, right? That is what it means. But is it really possible? No. See, it tells you that you could run all this, right? If you have, but again, for running a single slot, you need 1 core processor. Okay. So it depends how many core processors you have. My machine is a 8 core processor. Okay. It's a 8 core processor. So at max, I could achieve 8 parallel executions, right? 8 parallel sessions being generated. Okay, I could use it as a combination, right? If I have used, let's say, 5 for Chrome, and let's say 2 for Firefox, and 1 for Edge, I am not left with any other slot which could be supported by my machine. Okay, so the total, as soon as you reach 8, right, you cannot run any more thing parallelly. Okay, and that becomes a limitation to run things on that particular node. Okay, so understand about the node part also. Okay, so I hope you're understanding this part. Okay, now people say that if we want to run things, can we do on a single machine? Yes, you can do it, but the part is you have to understand like how capable your system is to run things, right? You have 8 core processor. You're not only running your test cases there, right? You are also running your code, you're running your other stuff on your machine. They also consume core processor, right? So depending on what how available your core processor is, you will be able to make the decision. I mean, you would be able to achieve that kind number of parallel execution, right? Depending on the available core processors you have. Okay, coming back to our original discussion, right? Which was, so we talked about this, right? And this is the hub and node part, right? Let us start our execution on this part, right? So we saw a node was generated. It got added to our distributor, and now let's generate a new session. To generate a new session, what we'll do is we'll just simply run a test, and let's see what happens now. Let it start a session. Okay, it started a session. Let me show you here, and see a session ID was generated, and it is showing that, right? Okay, so let it complete this session. I will show the logs now. Okay, so it completed. Now see the session ID, right? It generated this session ID. Let's check the logs. This is the log coming from hub. Okay, this is the hub log, and this is the log coming from the node part. Okay, so see here, when we started our script, right? Okay, when we started our script, what happened, right? It our node. Okay, when we started our session, distributor received that request, right? And this distributor sent that request to a node, first of all, right? Once the node, see the timing here, right? Let me show you the timing. Does it show a timing here? It is not showing the timings. Okay, 18:5:56:113. 19:5:56:205. See here, it is the time only, right? It is saying at 7 p.m. 5 minutes 56 seconds and this milliseconds, and this is that 3 seconds. So you can see the first, right? Once the distributor received the request, it first of all, see, when we started our test case, our request, we, as soon as this command ran, right, which was that new remote web driver, right, which I showed you, this part, as soon as this got executed, right, an entry was made into the session queue. Distributor came to know about this. Distributor did what? It knew that it knows about the nodes which are available. It asked that node, are you able to handle this session or not? Session said that, in the node said, yes, I am capable. So at 113 millisecond, I mean at this time, right? At this time, it said that, okay, I created a session which is with this ID. Okay, check the ID over here in the output, right? This is same. Okay, so it created the session ID. Once it created a session ID, it told distributor about it. So how it told? It told it through the event bus. Okay, through event bus, the information was passed on to the distributor, and at 205 milliseconds, which is like 100 milliseconds later, distributor received that request, and it printed this, right? That it has created a session ID for it. Okay, which is this. And then what it would have done is it would have gone to the session map and add an entry of this session ID with the node ID. Okay, this is how it worked. Okay, great. Now the last part, which is the distributed mode. Let's see how it works. Okay, now it is a complex setup, but let me start that. Okay, but one more thing, right? Let me show you this. In the node, when we were talking about that slots part, right? I wanted to cover this part also. See, if you would read the logs, this is for node part, right? Once you started it, right, it is checking all the things, and after this, see here, adding to set up this period automatically and all that. See here, it is saying adding Internet Explorer for this, right? 1 times. Okay. It is saying adding Chrome 8 times, adding Edge for 8 times, adding Firefox 8 times, right? Registration process and all that. And setup unable to proper devices. And there was an information about the processor also, where I could see that information. Okay. Okay, I don't see it as of now, but okay. But that is how it is, right? So you can see from the log that how many slots it booked for a specific browser, right? So this is the information which is printed in the logs also, right, of a node. Okay, the last part. Let me stop this. Okay, as soon as I stop this, right, you will see the node is gone, right, on the grid, on the hub. And let me stop the hub now. So now the Selenium grid would get down. Let me stop this, right, and let me clear this space. Okay, and let me open six different I mean these command prompts. One is this, one is this. Okay, so I will try to open it in a mode where I'll keep distributor and the node on the top and all four components down. Okay, so let me do it very quickly. Command prompt. So okay, so this is one part, and over here I need to e drive, sorry, e drive, and let me copy this part and to cd and this. Okay, so I'll run this part. So this would become our let me clear this screen, let me clear the screen, and let me start it another. Okay, let me do it quickly from here. cmd. Okay, so I started a new session for this, and let me edit here on the bottom, right? So, and let me reduce the size so we can see all of this. And let me start one more thing. cmd, start it again. Let me show it here. Let me bring it here. So this is, and let me place it here. Okay, and let me create one more, because we need individual, right? For all the 6 components, we need one command prompt so that we can spin them up. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll start spinning them one by one. Now, see, earlier, understand the port numbers also, right? I told you the port numbers, right, which were being used. They have a relevance, right? That is why we are discussing that part. Just a second. Okay, so where is that part? This thing, right? Okay, we see. I told you this port, right? The port number for router is 4444. Okay, the port number for nodes, which we will spin up only one node, so that port will start on port number 5555. Okay, now the other things, right? Session queue will start at the port number 5559. Okay, and event bus will start at the port number 5557. Okay, session map will start at the port number 5556, and distributor will start at the port number 55553. Okay, so understand, this is the default configuration, right? The default ports which are configured given by the Selenium grid. Okay, now let's start spinning them up. Okay, so first of all, I'll spin up the session queue. Okay, and this is what I'll do. Let me grab this, let me put it down, and let me first clean this cls here, right? Let me start the session queue here in the bottom part. So I'm starting session queue. What is session queue? This component, this component. This is the session queue, right? The session queue where it will accept all the incoming new session requests, right? It will hold all of them. So we provided a port number for it, which is 5559, right? It is saying started Selenium session queue on this port. Okay. Now let's start the next part. We'll start now the event bus. Okay. Event bus is this part. Let me start it here. Okay, sorry. Let me start the event bus. Okay. So once the event bus is started, event bus ready, right? And this is the this is the port number for it. Okay, which it assigned. Okay. Now let me start the third component, which is the session map. So session map, let me start here. So this is the session map, right? So we have started three components, right? So session map is also started now. Let me start the fourth component. The fourth component is the distributor part, which is a very important part for us. So we started this distributor here. Okay. And the next part is the router, right? The face of our Selenium grid, right? So let me start this. This is starting at port number 4444. Once this gets started, we'll wait for this to start. So it started, right? And last part is to start a node, right? So let me start a node and let me run this. So this is the node. Okay. So see here, once the node got created, right? See here in the distributor, this is the distributor part. See, it will add an entry to this. See here. Once the node got registered, right? The node was added, it sended a registration event. A registration event was passed through this event bus. Where is our event bus? Where is our event bus? This is our event bus? Yes, this is our event bus, right? So internally, it received that communication and it passed on that information to distributor. As soon as the node was generated and it was registered, it assigned a node ID to it, okay, in the distributor here. And till now we have not generated a request. Let's now generate a request. Okay. So again, the process is same. We'll come here and run this. Okay. And let me make this down and let's see the logs here. You will see these two moving, right? We will not see anything in these four things, but in these two you will see. You will see a new and a session queue, right? Which is a session queue. Session queue, right? This one. The request once we requested a request, a session request, it would be received by this, right? But again, it will not show the logs here. These are all internals. But see here, the browser was started, and you can see, right, an entry was made here in the node also, and then in the distributor also. See, right? Again, the execution is happening here. So it did all the execution. Let me stop this. Okay, and see here the timing, right? Again, 2:45, right? So 17:4 So it received a request. The node received the request, and it generated a session ID. This is the session ID. The session ID over here, which is generated, is this one, right? BC9D. And let's check the logs again. BC9D. This is the one, right? And this is at this time. Once node generated a session in the provided slot it had, so the one of the slot was occupied. Once the slot was occupied, now it is left with seven more slots, right? And it sent that information to the register through the event bus, and at 5:16, which is the next second, it entered that information here, right, with the session ID, and it told. And now after this, it would have the distributor would have gone to what? Our session map. This is our session. This is event bus. So this is our session queue. This is our sessions. This is the one, right, where it will go and make an entry in our session maps. Okay, about the node and the browser thing, right, the session thing. And this is how this works in the distributed mode. Now, what is the value of distributed mode? If you would try to understand, right, what is really happening? What is really happening is that let's say that you have a very large scale setup. You wanted to test on multiple things and all, right? running it on a single machine will not suffice. So companies, very enterprise companies, right, where they want to test things on multiple browsers, multiple platforms and all, there they would be using this kind of a setup where distributed mode, right, where they would be creating, let's say, hundreds of nodes, right? And because the execution is so intense, that they wanted to dedicate a separate machine for every such component, okay, so that it can handle the load, right, so that the processing power which that machine has can be used by these different components, and they can do the needful, right, in managing all things, right? Now there's a special, I mean, understand, there's one special thing, right? Have you heard about browser stack, lambda test and all that, right? Try to understand what they're doing, right? I mean, I'm not saying that they are going to use this setup only, Selenium, but try to understand they are exposing their I mean, the endpoint, right, to you, right? Understand that at that endpoint as like an uh, the URL for your router, okay? You passed on, you are connecting to that router which they are publishing as an external endpoint, and you're accessing it, providing the API keys and all that. Also tell them that please spin up a Windows machine with this browser, right? They will go in and try to find the nodes which they already have configured at their end in the setups, right? They will go and check, okay, this is the node which someone has asked, let me bring it up and assign this node to this request, right? And it will make an entry. I mean, I'm not saying that they are working as is, I don't know like what they're doing, but understand, like, this is very similar to what they do, right? So this is how it is, right? And that is why it was important to understand how Selenium Grid works. It also refines your understanding to understand like how those cloud-based setups, right, which are browser stack, lambda test, p cloudy and others, right, helps you to run things, right? And this is how it works, right? I really hope that you got a lot of insights here. You understood like what is this all, right, and how this really helps us to, I mean, in our execution part. I mean, and this is what I wanted to cover for today. Nothing more from my side, and I will open up the channel for any questions or something which someone wants to ask. That is what I wanted to cover for today. Thank you. Yeah, if anyone wants to ask something or discuss something, they can raise their hand. They can raise their hand, and I will provide the access. No, no worries. But thank you so much for joining today. Okay, and I really appreciate your effort and your time, right, you invested into seeing this and learning about this. Okay, so I really hope let's meet the next time also, and I will bring up a new exciting topic to connect and to see, right? And if you are interested into learning full stack bootcamp, there is a bootcamp which I am running for full stack also. You can check our website podtest.in, okay, and you can check the details there. If you are interested, please register for it. I will send more details about it. And there is nothing more which I wanted to say or talk about. Thank you for your time. I understand this is Sunday and you will have some more, you will have some other busy thing, right? So again, thank you so much for joining today. Have a nice week ahead, and I really wish best for the learnings which you will be taking care. Thank you. Bye. Bye. Thank you. Bye.